It was a typical Friday night. I was sitting on my living room couch, enjoying a beer and absent-mindedly watching TV. My wife, Eleni, had gone to bed early as she had an important meeting the following day. Our son, Nikos, was already asleep in his room upstairs. Outside, the wind howled, causing the windows to rattle slightly. I was about to turn off the TV and go to bed when I heard a soft knock on the front door. I glanced at my watch. It was 11:45 p.m. Who could it be at this hour? At first, I thought of ignoring it, but the knock came again, this time more insistent. I sighed and got up from the couch. As I approached the door, I felt a strange sensation overcome me. It was as if a weight had settled in my stomach, a feeling that something wasn't right. I opened the door, and what I saw left me speechless. Two children, a boy and a girl, stood on my doorstep. They couldn't have been more than 12 years old. They wore simple clothes, jeans and t-shirts, but something about them seemed wrong. "Can we come in?" the boy asked in an oddly monotone voice for a child his age. "We need help," added the girl, her voice equally colorless. That's when I noticed their eyes. They were completely black. Not just dark brown, but pitch black, like two pieces of coal in place of their eyes. There was no white, no iris, only a bottomless darkness that seemed to swallow me whole. I felt my blood run cold. Every instinct screamed to close the door, run, and hide, but I couldn't move. It was as if I was paralyzed. "Please," the boy said, "we need to come in. It's not safe outside." His voice was flat and emotionless, but something about it interested me. I wanted to give in, to let them in, but something deep inside me resisted. "I'm sorry," I managed to stammer, "but I can't let strangers into my house at this hour. I can call someone to come help you if you'd like." Their faces remained expressionless, but I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The air around us grew heavier and thicker. "You have to let us in," the girl said, her voice more insistent. "You don't understand. It's important." I felt a lump in my throat. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to obey. Instead, I heard myself say, "Maybe you could tell me what's going on first?" The children exchanged a glance before the boy spoke again. "We can't tell you outside. We need to come in first." As he spoke, I felt an irresistible urge to step back, to let them pass. My feet started moving against my will. Panicking, I managed to grab onto the doorframe, stopping my movement. "No," I said, trying to sound firm. "I'm sorry, but you can't come in. You need to leave now." For a moment, the children didn't move. Then, slowly, their faces began to change. Their lips pulled back, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp to belong to a human being. Their black eyes appeared to grow, taking up more space on their faces. "You're making a mistake," the boy said, his voice more profound and menacing. "We will come in, one way or another." I felt terror flood through me. With one last effort, I managed to slam the door shut and turn the key. I collapsed onto the floor, trembling and gasping for air. For a few minutes, there was absolute silence. Then, I heard a soft laugh from the other side of the door. "It's okay," the girl's voice said. "We'll wait. We have all the time in the world." I stayed awake all night, listening to their footsteps on my porch. Now and then, a soft knock on the door made me jump, but I didn't dare look outside. When dawn finally broke, I dared to peek out the window. The porch was empty. There was no sign of the children, but deep down, I knew they hadn't left. They were out there somewhere, waiting, and I knew they would be back. The next few days passed in a haze of fear and paranoia. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every shadow, every sudden noise made me jump. Eleni was worried about me, but I couldn't tell her what had happened. How could I explain something I didn't even understand myself? A week after the incident, I was returning home late from work. It was a dark, rainy night, and I only wanted to get home and lock myself inside. As I turned onto our street, I saw two figures standing under a streetlight. My heart stopped. It was them, the children with the black eyes. I tried to speed up, but the car engine suddenly died. Panicking, I tried to restart it, but nothing happened. And then, I saw them approaching. I locked the car doors but knew it wouldn't stop them. I closed my eyes, praying they would disappear. When I opened them again, they stood right next to my window. "Open the door," the boy said. "It's time for you to come with us." I felt my hand move towards the unlock button. I tried to resist, but my will seemed to weaken every second. "Why?" I managed to whisper. "What do you want from me?" The girl smiled, a smile that made my blood run cold. "You don't understand yet? You're special. You have something we need." I felt tears streaming down my cheeks. "Please," I begged, "leave me alone. I have nothing you want." The boy laughed, a laugh that sounded like glass shattering. "You have everything we want. Your soul, your essence, your very existence. You're the key we've been searching for centuries." His voice echoed in my mind, making me dizzy. I felt like I was sinking into an abyss, losing control. My hand trembled as it neared the unlock button. Suddenly, a bright light shone behind the children. It was the headlights of an approaching car. For a moment, the creatures seemed disoriented. I took the opportunity and honked the horn with all my might. The sound broke the spell. The children recoiled, covering their ears. Without wasting any time, I tried to start the car again. This time, the engine roared to life. I hit the gas, and the car surged forward. In the rearview mirror, I saw the children standing still in the middle of the road, their black eyes fixed on me. As I drove away, I heard their voices following me. "You can't escape us. We will find you." I arrived home, shaking and sweating. Eleni was waiting for me, worried. "What happened?" she asked as soon as she saw me. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't tell her the truth. How could she understand? Instead, I muttered something about a tough day at work and went straight to bed. But sleep didn't come quickly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those black, empty eyes staring at me. I heard their voices whispering in the dark. I woke up drenched in sweat, screaming. Days passed, and my condition worsened. I couldn't focus at work. I saw the children everywhere. On the street, outside my office, even in the window's reflections. Eleni tried to convince me to see a doctor, but I knew no doctor could help me. One night, I woke up from a nightmare to find myself standing in front of the open balcony door of our bedroom. The cold night air hit my face, and there, on the balcony, stood the children. "It's time," the boy said. "You can't resist any longer." I felt my feet moving towards them. I tried to scream, to wake Eleni, but no words came out. As I approached, the children reached out their hands. Their fingers were long and thin, with nails sharp as razors. "Come with us," the girl said. "We'll show you things you've never imagined." I was ready to surrender, to let the darkness consume me. But then, I heard a voice behind me. "Dad?" I turned and saw Nico standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "What are you doing out there?" My son's voice brought me back to reality. I felt strength returning to my body. "Nothing, my boy," I said, trying to sound calm. "Go back to bed." I turned to look at the balcony again, but the children had vanished. I quickly closed and locked the balcony door. That night, I decided as I held my son in my arms. I wouldn't let these creatures destroy my life and my family. I would find a way to stop them, no matter the cost. The next day, I began my research. I spent hours online, searching for information about the children with black eyes. At first, I found only horror stories and urban legends, but as I dug deeper, I began to find accounts that seemed too natural to be mere stories. Testimonies were obtained from people worldwide who had encountered these creatures. Their stories were eerily similar to mine. The children always appeared at night, asking to be let into homes or cars. Those who let them in disappeared without a trace. But there were also stories of survival, people who had managed to resist the children's charm and drive them away. All these stories had one thing in common: light. The creatures seemed to weaken in bright light. Some witnesses reported using flashlights or floodlights to repel them, while others resorted to religious symbols or prayers. As I read these stories, I felt a glimmer of hope. There may be a way to fight back against this threat. But I knew I didn't have much time. The children would return, and I might not be so lucky next time. I began to prepare. I bought powerful flashlights and placed them in every room of the house. I installed additional security lights around the house. I even added extra spotlights to my car. Eleni watched me with concern as I made all these preparations. "What's going on?" she kept asking me. "Why are you suddenly so afraid of the dark?" I couldn't tell her the truth. How could I explain that the creatures from our nightmares were real and were hunting us? Instead, I told her I had read about a series of break-ins in the neighborhood and wanted to be prepared. Days passed with no sign of the children. I relaxed a little, believing they had given up the chase. But deep down, I knew this was just the calm before the storm. And I was right. One night, I woke up to the sound of breaking glass. I shot up, my heart pounding wildly. Eleni was still asleep beside me. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and quietly left the room. I heard whispers coming from the living room as I descended the stairs. It was the voices I had heard in my nightmares. They were here. I reached the bottom step and peeked into the living room. What I saw froze the blood in my veins. The children stood in the center of the room, their black eyes gleaming in the darkness. The broken window behind them explained how they had gotten in. But what terrified me most was what they were holding. My son Nikos stood between them, his eyes glassy and empty. The boy with the black eyes had his hand on Nikos' shoulder as if guiding him. "At last," the girl said, her voice chilling. "We've come to take what is ours." Panic consumed me. "Leave my son alone," I shouted, forgetting all attempts at silence. The boy smiled, revealing teeth sharp as razors. "You still don't understand, do you? Your son is the key. He's what we need." I felt my blood run cold. "What do you mean?" "Your son has a gift," the girl explained. "A power you can't imagine. And we will use it to open the gate." "What gate?" I asked, trying to buy time as my mind desperately searched for a way out. "The gate to our world," the boy replied. "We've waited centuries for someone like Nikos. And now, finally, we can bring the others." The terror I felt at that moment was indescribable. I didn't know precisely what they meant, but I knew I couldn't let it happen. Without thinking, I turned on the flashlight and aimed it at the children. The bright light hit them like a physical force. They screamed in a voice that sounded nothing like human and recoiled, covering their eyes. I seized the opportunity and lunged forward, grabbing Nikos and pulling him away from them. As I touched him, I felt a wave of energy surge. For a moment, I saw images flash before my eyes, dark worlds, strange creatures, ancient powers. I understood that this was the gift they were talking about. "Dad?" Nikos' voice brought me back to reality. His eyes had cleared, and he looked at me, confused. "Everything's going to be okay," I told him, though I wasn't sure. The children with the black eyes began to recover from the shock of the light. Their faces were twisted with rage, their features more animalistic now. "You can't stop us," the boy growled. "We will take the child one way or another." I knew they were right. I couldn't keep them at bay forever. I needed help. And then, as if in answer to my desperate prayer, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Eleni appeared, her eyes wide with terror as she entered the scene before her. "What the hell is going on here?" she shouted. Her appearance distracted the creatures for a moment. It was all I needed. "Eleni!" I shouted. "The lights! Turn on all the lights!" Eleni ran to the switch and turned on the living room lights without a second thought. At the same time, I hit the button I had installed for the exterior security lights. The room was flooded with light, so bright it hurt my eyes. The children with the black eyes screamed again, this time a scream full of pain and rage. I saw their bodies begin to melt like wax in a flame. Their skin smoked and peeled away, revealing something dark and unnatural beneath. "This isn't over," the girl said, her voice now a deep, inhuman growl. "We'll be back. And next time, we'll be ready." With one final scream of fury, the creatures vanished in a cloud of black smoke, leaving only a choking smell of sulfur. For a few minutes, none of us spoke. Nikos trembled in my arms, and Eleni looked at us with terror and confusion. What were those?" she finally whispered. I sighed deeply. "It's a long story," I said, "and I'm afraid it's not over yet." As we sat in our overly bright living room, with the shattered glass glittering on the floor, I knew our lives would never be the same again. We had won this battle, but the war had just begun. And as I looked at my son, I wondered what other powers lay within him and what that would mean for our future. One thing was sure: I would do whatever it took to protect him, no matter the cost. Dawn found us still awake, sitting close to each other, with all the lights in the house on. None of us wanted to sleep, fearing what might come in the dark. As the first rays of the sun began to break through the clouds, I felt a small wave of relief. We had survived the night, but I knew this was only the beginning. I looked at my family. Eleni, her eyes red from sleeplessness but filled with determination, and Nikos, who had finally fallen asleep in his mother's arms. I knew we would need each other more than ever in the days to come. "What do we do now?" Eleni asked softly, not wanting to wake Nikos. I took a deep breath. "We need to learn more," I said, "about what these creatures are, what they want from Nikos, and how we can stop them. And we need to prepare, because, as they said, they'll be back." Eleni nodded. "We'll face it together," she said, squeezing my hand. As I looked out the window at the world waking up, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows, I knew our lives had changed forever. But as long as we had each other, we had hope. With that thought, I began to plan our next step in the war against the children with black eyes. In the following weeks, our lives became a constant effort of preparation and research. We spent endless hours searching the internet, libraries, and even old bookstores, looking for any information about the children with the black eyes and the forces that hunted them. Nikos, meanwhile, began to display strange abilities. Sometimes I found him staring into space, muttering words in languages I didn't recognize. Other times, objects around him started to levitate for no apparent reason. It was frightening, but we tried not to show him our fear. One night, about a month after the incident, Nikos woke up screaming. We rushed to his room and found him sitting in bed, his eyes glowing an unnatural blue. "They're coming," he said in a voice that didn't sound like his own. "The gate is opening." At that moment, I felt the ground tremble beneath our feet. Outside, the sky lit up with a strange green light. "We need to go," I said to Eleni. "Now." We grabbed the packed emergency bags without wasting time and rushed to the car. As we drove away from the house, I saw shadows gathering around it, dark figures with eyes that glowed like embers in the darkness. I drove with no clear destination, just trying to get as far away as possible. Nikos had calmed down somewhat, but his eyes still had that strange blue glow. "Where are we going?" Eleni asked, her voice trembling with fear. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I know someone who might be able to help us." In my research, I found references to a man, a medium or exorcist, depending on who you asked, who lived in a remote village in the mountains. It was said that he had faced the children with black eyes before and survived. After hours of driving, we arrived at a small, almost deserted village. Most of the houses were dark and seemed uninhabited. But at the edge of the village, we saw a light flickering in a window. We stopped in front of the house and got out of the car. As we approached the door, it opened before we could knock. An older woman stood in the doorway. Her hair was white as snow, and her eyes were milky as if she were blind. But her gaze was fixed on us with piercing intensity. "I've been expecting you," she said in a deep, raspy voice. "Come in. We don't have much time." We entered the house, filled with strange objects, crystals, ancient books, and symbols carved into the walls. "I know why you're here," the woman said as she closed the door behind us. "The child. He has the gift." She looked at Nikos, her milky eyes glowing with a strange intensity. "He's more powerful than you think, but he's also in great danger." "What is the gift?" I asked. "And what do they want from him?" The woman sighed deeply. "The gift is an ancient power, the ability to open gates between worlds, and the creatures that are hunting you. They want to use it to bring their world here." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "How can we stop them?" The woman smiled sadly. "It's not that simple, but there is a way. You must teach Nikos to control his gift. Only then will you have a chance." I looked at my son, who sat quietly in a corner, his eyes still glowing with that strange blue light. I knew we had a difficult journey ahead of us, but I was determined to do whatever it took to protect him. "Tell us what we need to do," I told the woman. And so, our training in the supernatural world began, training that would prepare us for the battle to come. A battle that would determine not only the future of our family, but perhaps the entire world. The following weeks were filled with intense training and preparation. The woman, who told us to call her Grandma Sophia, taught us ancient techniques of protection and defense against dark forces. Nikos learned to control his powers, though the process was painful and exhausting. There were times when I thought we would lose him as he struggled to harness the energy flowing through him. But each time, he emerged victorious, stronger, and more determined. Eleni and I learned to create protective circles, use ancient symbols, and invoke forces I never believed existed. It was a world beyond logic, but slowly, I began to accept it as our new reality. One night, as we sat around the fire, Grandma Sophia revealed more about our enemy. "The children with the black eyes are just the beginning," she said, her voice heavy with the knowledge of centuries. "They are the forerunners, the scouts. Behind them come the true lords of darkness." "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a chill run through me. "There are worlds beyond ours," she explained. "Dark and terrible worlds, filled with creatures that would make even the bravest man tremble with fear. And they want to come here, to conquer our world." "And Nikos is the key to doing that?" Eleni asked, squeezing our son's hand. Grandma Sophia nodded. "The gift can open the gate between worlds, but it can also close it forever." We looked at Nikos, who sat quietly, his eyes reflecting the flames of the fire. He seemed so small, so innocent, and yet, the fate of not just our survival, but the survival of humanity rested on his shoulders. "When will they come?" I finally asked. Grandma Sophia closed her eyes as if listening to something we couldn't hear. "Soon," she finally said. "Very soon. The next full moon will be when they try to open the gate." I looked at the calendar on the wall. The next full moon was in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to prepare for a battle that would determine the future of humanity. In the days before the full moon, our training intensified. Nikos learned to wield his powers with greater precision and control, and Eleni and I perfected the protection and defense techniques Grandma Sophia had taught us. As the night of the full moon approached, the atmosphere grew thick with a sense of impending danger. The air felt heavier, the sky darker. Even the animals in the forest around the village seemed uneasy. Grandma Sophia called us all into her room on the eve of the great night. She opened an old, leather-bound book and began to read an ancient prophecy. "When light and darkness meet, when worlds draw near, the child of the gift will stand at the threshold. In his hands, he will hold the fate of all. He can seal the gate forever with the power of love and sacrifice, but all will be lost if he falters and succumbs to the darkness." We looked at Nikos, who stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the moon growing larger in the sky. I knew he understood the weight that rested on his shoulders. "Are you ready, my son?" I asked gently. He turned and looked at us, his eyes filled with a wisdom far beyond his years. "Yes, Dad," he said. "I'm ready." As night fell, we began our final preparations. The battle was about to begin, and we intended to win it, no matter the cost. The night of the full moon had arrived. The sky was clear, and the moon shone like a giant eye watching us. The atmosphere was heavy, filled with a sense of impending danger. Following Grandma Sophia's instructions, we created a protective circle around the house, using salt, herbs, and ancient symbols. Nikos stood in the center of the circle, his eyes glowing with that strange blue light. As the clock struck midnight, the air around us began to thicken. Dark shadows started gathering at the edges of our protective circle. And then, we saw them. The children with black eyes appeared first, with dozens standing still and staring at us with empty dark eyes. Behind them, larger, more terrifying figures began to take shape, creatures from nightmares with bodies that seemed to be made of smoke and shadow. "The time has come," Grandma Sophia said, her voice steady despite the danger. "Nikos, you need to start now." Our son closed his eyes and began to whisper the words he had learned over the past few weeks. Ancient words of power that would close the gate forever. As Nikos spoke, the air around us began to vibrate. A light started to emanate from his body, slowly spreading outward. The creatures outside the circle began to scream, a sound that made my blood run cold. Furious, they attacked our protective circle, trying to break through and reach Nikos. Eleni and I stood beside our son, holding his hands and offering him our strength. I could feel the energy flowing through us, strengthening Nikos' spell. But the forces of darkness were strong. Our protective circle began to flicker, weakening under the relentless assault. "It won't hold much longer," Grandma Sophia shouted. "Nikos, you must finish the spell now." Nikos opened his eyes, which now shone like two blue flames. "I can't," he said, his voice trembling. "They're too strong." "You can do it," I told him, squeezing his hand. "We're here with you. We love you and believe in you." At that moment, one of the creatures managed to break through the circle. Without thinking, I leaped forward to protect my son. I felt a wave of unbearable pain as the creature struck me, knocking me to the ground. "Dad!" Nikos cried. And then, something inside him seemed to snap. The light around him became blinding, spreading in all directions. The creatures of darkness screamed in agony as the light engulfed them. I saw their bodies melting, disappearing into the blinding light. And then suddenly, it was over. The light vanished, and the night returned to its normal state. The creatures were gone. Nikos collapsed to his knees, exhausted. Eleni rushed to him, holding him tightly. "You did it," Grandma Sophia whispered, her milky eyes filled with tears. "You closed the gate. You saved us all." As I slowly got to my feet, feeling every muscle in my body ache, I looked at my family. We had been through something unbelievable, something most people would never believe. But we had survived, and we won. As dawn began to break, bringing with it the promise of a new day, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. But we were together, and that was all that mattered. Our journey might have ended, but I knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, a chapter filled with new challenges and the incredible strength we had discovered within ourselves. As I looked at Nikos, my son, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together as a family. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more spine-chilling tales. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and share your scary encounters. Also, consider joining the Fear Frequencies community for exclusive perks and early access to new content. Your support helps us create even more thrilling stories. And if you really enjoyed it, please consider leaving a super thanks.